Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 59, The Leaving Show.
Ha. That sounds ominous. That's like when your boss says to you, "Can I talk to you for a second?" God.
No, we are not leaving. But actually, what got us thinking was Eugene is leaving. You are leaving the country to move to Spain.
Yes.
And when do you go?
June 21st.
Wow. And so,
but it's complicated and confusing. But ultimately, by this fall, yes, I will be ensconced in my new abode in Spain. Right. But I fly to Berlin, then I fly back to tour the U.S. with the band Buñuel, and then I go back to Poland where I meet the rest of the family, and then I do 2 more shows in England. The wife does a competition in Florida in August. And then we go back to Poland and then to Spain. But it's a jam-packed summer. So,
well, and we've talked on this show about quitting or being laid off or some of those unexpected transitions. But we wanted to talk about volitional leaving. Like, you are choosing to leave the country. You don't have to. And a lot of people choose to leave a job or leave a relationship. And we don't often talk about the mechanics of that. Right? What do you do in that leave taking to make it be kind of graceful, right? So what do we do more about some of the volitional leaving, kind of planning, preparing, getting ready to do so, right?
And it is rough. I had a friend recently, he's 30 years old, and he got hired by a friend of his at a stock trading company. And he got a chance to get a job at Google. And he did 2 or 3 interviews at Google before it didn't pan out. But he was agonizing. It was like 3 weeks of agonizing. What am I going to tell my boss? I go, "Oh, what do you care?" He goes, "Well, he's my buddy." So not only was he a boss, but he was a buddy. And it was like just putting him. And I mean, he was almost relieved when Google said, "No, we're going to go another way." He was almost relieved, right, that he didn't have to do this difficult emotional thing. So,
right. So how do you, you've got a young daughter, like, how are you preparing her and your family to do an international move?
Well, the thing is, I first and foremost, I need to remember to be sympathetic, because I moved 9 times before I was 10. And so I'm like a military kid. Like, I'm used to going to a place, making friends with people, and then, at the end of the year, ciao, ciao, so you don't, you don't go, even though the neighborhoods in Brooklyn could be a mile apart, you don't go back to the old neighborhood, right? You stick to your new place. So to make it real for her, what I've been doing is, because I've been there about 8, 9, 10 times, videos, photos of me standing in her room. This is your room. Letting her be part of the process of, the interior designers, CAD markups, which are computer aided design markups. And so it is, there's now with the internet, we can do a street view. We can look at the street, the neighborhood, and there are lots of things in town that, kids might like. For whatever reason, the town is obsessed with donkeys. So there are donkeys all over the town, and they're trying to make it unsuccessfully, thank goodness, trying to make it like a tourist attraction. But it just ends up being kind of a sleepy little town, which is very cool. And it's close to the water. So she's excited. And it also helps that she's right at the time where things would have changed radically anyway, because she's turning 5 and she starts real school in September. So it would have been what she has known was going to change anyway. What's being sold to her is that the ways in which it's going to change are greater in every aspect, outside of the fact that it's different. So I think she's geeked, to have a pool where before we had to go to a pool is a major sales point for her.
Yeah. At 4, almost 5, that's pretty much like all you need to say.
That's it. Yeah. Not in the hot tub. She's like, okay. So.
Exactly. Well, so, one of the things that you're talking about right now, I think is useful for anyone that is leaving in a way that requires a relocation, is to recognize that the people that are moving with you, if you have people that are moving with you, are going to have their own narratives, and to be intentional about that, right? Spouse, partner, children. A 4, almost 5-year-old is going to have a very different attitude towards moving to another place than a 15-year-old.
Well, also listen, they say one of the starting a new job, moving and having a new child, these are three of the most stressful things that people can do. And to defray this, I started moving months ago. I found a moving company that will do partials, and they'll put them on a pallet and put them in a warehouse and then on a ship, because I didn't need to pay for rapid shipping. So I've been shipping stuff since February. Mostly all of what I own are books and records, and of course, yeah, videos. I mean, it seems terribly anachronistic that I'm taking VHS tapes, but I've got special things in there, like film directors who I've interviewed who've given me, here, you should take this, original custom made. It's a VHS tape, but it was so all this stuff is being shipped and should be there next week. And I'm going to do one last tranche. And the worst thing about moving to me is it forces a reexamination of everything you've done before, because you have to go through everything that you've had before.
Right.
And I'm a pack rat. So every letter that I've ever gotten, which was it was nice to do it in dribbles and drabs, because otherwise it would have been a lot. So
Right. I have vinyl records you made many decades ago, still in a box.
Yeah, I'm still making vinyl records too, and that's a drag, because like the ones I haven't sold, I guess I gotta take them to not sell them in Spain. I mean, I'm not gonna throw them out. So
it's funny. My son-in-law, who is a musician, was like, look, he's like, I mean, kind of some respect. Like, wow, you've got like vinyl, like you've got. I was like, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So a couple of things about leavings is, one, let people say goodbye to you. Right. So a lot of people, I happen to be one of those people who will do the, what is it called? French exit, Irish exit, depending on where you are. It's a something exit, which means
Irish goodbye.
Yeah, Irish goodbye, which means you leave without telling anyone that you're leaving. And that's absolutely my MO. But recognizing when I have left jobs to go to other jobs, sometimes people want to say goodbye. And they want to celebrate you. They want to acknowledge, your contribution. And for some people in some relationships, that's really important, right? I like the British phrase, they give you a leaving do, right? A going away party. And sometimes you have to let them do that to give your team members closure, to give, even yourself an opportunity to have that sort of ritual. Are you a Irish goodbye person?
Well, it depends. And I mean, I've been thinking about this, right? Like when I left Nikon, and if you remember, Nikon is a case where the guy who hired me pleaded for me to stay. Will you stay at least a year? Yes. 2 years? Yes. 3 years? Yes. 4 years? I go, okay, Bill, let's not push it. So I stayed as long as I said. I stayed 3 years. And when I left there, I have people who are still there. And that was when Grace was born, and Grace is 28 years old. So it dawned on me, this is a place I could stay forever and not have to, no job insecurity. I could just keep very comfortable job. I wrote a novel when I was there, very easy. But I went to Apple after that, which is probably the best business move I ever made. But they had a party for me, and it was pretty emotional, because this 3 years I spent with these people, and I did not want to go to Apple, because I was so familiar and so comfortable. I was comfortable staying. So it would have been easier to do an Irish goodbye then. But other places, if there's a layoff or they folded the magazine, those are quite easy. Just to, I don't get sentimental about these. And a lot of times I'll be driving along and somebody will say, "Oh, look, there's Intel," and I'll look over and go, "Yeah, Intel. Oh, whoa, that's where I used to work." I'm not a sentimentalist about this stuff. These are just places that used to give me money, So.
Well, and a note about going away parties. I was talking to a friend this morning who is got laid off along with her entire team. She works in mental health support for schools and working primarily with kids of color who are disadvantaged. She and her team don't have a job anymore, and the organization gave them a going away party. And she said, I got a gift box that was probably designed by AI. And I'm like, why do you say that? She said, well, everything was done colored, and there was a little plastic plaque that said, like, you're great and wonderful. She said there was a scented candle that had a label on it that said scented candle. And there was a pair of socks that had a label on it that said cozy sock.
You
And
know what? Sometimes it's better not to give anything.
exactly. And the leader of the group, right? The person who was no doubt responsible for her being unemployed, although that person is really in the White House, um, didn't even come over and say goodbye.
Well,
It's like, yeah, and so there's also the
yeah,
intention.
there are weird things. I mean, this is the biggest professional mistake I made was going from Apple to Adobe because I assumed, oh, these were companies started by hippies, so they'll be like hippie companies. And so the same coolness I felt working at Apple and comfortability, I expected to be at Adobe. No, it wasn't the case. And Adobe laid off the entire kind of editorial team at once for what I feel were fairly good reasons. They expected that this is when in the days when .coms where companies were doing websites and they thought, oh, this will be a great, I can do an article. And at the end of the article, people will buy our software. It'll be a great idea. And of course, somebody did an analysis and found out there's a 1% return. So in other words, out of all the people reading the articles, only 1% of them were buying software at the end of the article. They go, we can just have the products. I say, laid off the entire team. Okay, that's understood. I think I was on vacation or on tour, but it was technically what I did with my vacation. They called and said, the whole team, we're all laid off, 10 people, we're done. And I go, great. I'm off of vacation in a few days and I'll settle out there. And they go, no, you need to settle now. I'm in New York City right now. How do you expect me to? You need to go over to FedEx. You need to take your laptop if you have it, put it in a box and send it. Put your badge in. I go, I don't have time for that. The guy who was telling me this knew me personally. I was like, I'm on tour. We're in a van right now. I don't have time to. He goes, you have to do it now. I said, is there somebody else I could talk to? No, you can't. And as luck would have it, that night in Brooklyn, parked somewhere, and the laptop got stolen. So I say, hey, man, the laptop got stolen. And they go, oh, next thing I know, I'm getting a call from the head of security at Adobe, who used to be a former FBI guy. And he goes, we're going to have to search your house. I said, tell you what, if I get back to California and you guys show up to search my house and you don't have a warrant, I will sue the fuck out of you. And I didn't hear from them again. But it was a completely hostile. I mean, talk about this was not an Irish exit. This was not a Genghis Khan exit. You laid me off. What is this paranoia and this aggression and this hostility, this bellicosity? It was really unpleasant, supremely unpleasant.
Well, and that's one of the notes that I wanted to say is like a perfect segue. Like, don't be surprised by the reaction of other people when you choose to leave a job, right? I mean, it might be a level of hostility. It might be a suspicion, right? Like, are you going to, take our secrets with you? Sometimes people will be jealous. Yeah. It'll make them look at like, well, why am I stuck in this company? And, in some cases, it can also be just like they can feel abandoned. Their feelings are hurt. They have a bond. They like the team. And, it can really kick up some very, very strong emotions in coworkers who you thought were your friends who are suddenly behaving weirdly because they don't have the emotional maturity to understand that they're having their own set of feelings and they're putting it on you.
And when I did my fight book, I had a whole section where I interviewed this guy who was like Aryan Nation. So he's a prisoner, a convict. And this is, fighter, everything you ever want to know about Asking King, afraid to get asking for asking. And he said, when he knew he was being released, an older convict had told him, do not tell anybody. Do not tell anybody you're leaving. And he goes, we're weird here like this. We're going to miss you, but we don't have the emotional background to be able to deal with this. So we're going to do something to screw up your exit. We are going to draw you into a fist fight, something that will push back that time. So pretty much you'll know you're leaving. You keep it to yourself. And then when they say call you up and it's your day to leave, you grab your box. Then as you're walking through the prison, say, all right, I'll catch you guys on the other side. And that's it. Do not tell anybody. And I said, so when you got out, he was in Arizona. And he said, did you stick to that advice? He goes, I did 100%. And when I left, I could see a mix on their faces of exactly why I was advised to do it that way. So, yeah. And speaking of books, here's another segue. Congratulations. You got your book out today.
Yeah, by the time this airs, it'll be last week. It came out on my book birthday. Yeah, the Saint and the Drunk.
Which I like.
To making.
Sorry, go ahead. Full title, go ahead.
The Saint and the Drunk, a guide to making the big decisions in your life.
what I love most about the title is before the colon, the Saint and the Drug, which reminds me of a book in 1972 that I was obsessed with, The Cross and the Switchblade. So it's a fine book, and you all should support the home team by buying it.
Well, thank you very much. In fact, it was funny when you were talking about going through old letters. For those of you that don't know, Eugene and I have been friends for, 40 years? Many, many decades.
Let's say, 88, something like that.
Yeah.
Even before that, from Stanford. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so we've been friends for a long time. And we were friends before email. So we used to write each other letters on pieces of paper. Pretty frequent. Yeah, with pens. And, we're both writers. So we wrote a lot. And I remember you telling me once, I was in my 20s, Stephanie, every letter I get from you talks about God and crying.
There you
And
go.
the funny thing was, you were right. You weren't joking. That was an accurate assessment. I mean, I'd just gone through a divorce. I had 2 little kids. There was a lot of no money. But it was funny because it's like, I'm still writing about God all these years later, just not in letters to you and my other friends, but actually.
Right. Well, now you've monetized it, which is perfect.
Yes. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed, right? So yes, thank you. Thank you for the shout out.
Well, no, definitely. I mean, you will sell more than if you never wrote one. So what the hell?
That is true. That is true. Yeah. So I also want to acknowledge that when you leave, people will be judgy, right? So one of the chapters in my book is to talk about cultural narratives that come up. And I have a whole chapter around cultural narratives around quitting. And quitting meant with air quotes, right? Because leaving a job, leaving a relationship, leaving a situation that doesn't serve you can be considered to be pivoting, moving after new opportunities. But some people think of it as quitting, like you have wasted your time. If someone gets a graduate degree in a certain field and then decides to pivot into something else, you could see a, cranky uncle saying, you just wasted all that money on that, master's degree and now you're doing something else. Right. And to really look at, people are going to have a judgment about what you're doing. Right.
I think the thing that I found most irksome, steadfastly most irksome, were the people who somehow managed to weave the conversation back around to, well, I could have got a job there, and which was a continuation of, if you went to a halfway decent school, we'll say, oh, what school you go to? You say, oh, I went to Stanford. Oh, yeah, I could have gotten there, but, and then there's the but, right? But my parents didn't have the money. I go, I paid for school myself. I'm still paying. I was 15 years to pay out my loans. I was, oh, okay. Oh, yeah, I could have got a job at Apple, but I just decided to stay at Nikon. Whatever. I didn't like what that revealed about them. I would have just, I just say you're going to miss me. I developed a marked hatred for that angle of attack.
Well, and sometimes it can come from a genuine fear, right? Like, I've talked to people who have had parents who were very poor. And when the kid said, hey, I want to be an artist, the parents blanched. I mean, I remember telling my dad, like, I want to be a writer. And he was like, okay, so you can be a lawyer because writing is good when you're a lawyer, and then you can write books in your spare time. Right. Yep. And he was not saying that because he wanted to squelch my ambitions to be a writer. He was saying that because he was a first generation Italian and he wanted his daughter to be able to support herself. And a lot of writers can't support themselves as effectively as, someone in the corporate world. My dad wanted to be a physicist. And he started losing his sight. And his doctor was like, you can get your PhD in physics and you will be blind, or you can stop and go and get a job. And he had a family to support. And, I was a baby. And, so I think that sometimes that judgment can come from a place that is well-meaning, but sometimes the judgment comes from envy, like some of the weird reactions in kind of the personal sphere, some of the weird reactions that come up when someone leaves a relationship, right? Like there's a divorce. And sometimes people have a sense, they'll look around and be like, I'm not that happily married either, but I don't want to have to take that choice, right? Like I have consigned myself to a soul-sucking job in corporate America. How dare Stephanie leave to work for herself and write a book? right? And
Yep.
so recognizing that those judgments, like you said, they're revealing information about the person who is having them. They're not necessarily pertinent to you.
Yeah, and then I mean, like I the greatest. I understand your father now being a father of somebody who was in their 20s, people who were in their 20s. But I also remember with great avidity the Andre Brower guy that we went to school with,
Yeah.
and who Emmy winning Andre Brower, who recently passed on. He'd showed up at Stanford to become a chemical engineer. He had a huge scholarship from a chemical engineering company, and that was his deal. And after we did a play together, the basic training of Pablo Hummel, and then followed up by Emperor Jones, and his reviews were so great on that that he had to then go home that summer and tell his parents, and his parents were blue collar. His dad worked in the Chicago road, said, "Nah, I want to be an actor." And that was not well received initially. But of course, years later, when he's on movies and TVs and red carpets, everybody was like, "I told him to do it." but initially that seemed like a crazy thing to do, both inside the family and outside the family. Mark Mancall, one of our professors, I remember him telling me to my face that he thought it was a waste of an education, but it worked well for Andre. So.
Well, and having seen Andre in Equus on stage in a teeny little experimental theater at Stanford, it was like zero surprise. Like there are some people who are just so talented, but I think also, and this is on my mind because it's a big part of my book. It's like you are the one responsible for your own life. And if there is something that you feel you need to do, right, whether it's art or whatever it is, and let other people have whatever their thoughts about it are. Like it's interesting because I did for my like book launch event was a workshop kind of / retreat last weekend. And it was, Labor Day weekend. I mean, Memorial Day weekend, 3-day weekend. It's sunny. It's Seattle. I was hoping like maybe we'll get 6 people, and we had 40 people, great, group. But it's interesting because one of the examples that I use of part of the book is I talk about a woman who's deciding whether or not to have children. And I kind of walk through discernment from both of those scenarios. And it's usually something that's pretty interesting. And when I got to the part of like, here's the example where she decides not to have children, some of the older women in the audience just balked. They're like, well, but no, I mean, she's going to want to have kids later. And I'm like, no, really, you can make, and I realized that the idea for these women, and it was just a few, there were a lot of younger people in the audience too, who were like looking at these older, like, what are you talking about? But this idea of like, you can make a decision not to have a child, that is a valid decision for anyone to make, and they can know that that is right for them. It doesn't mean that they're not going to have parents and aunts and uncles who have a really strong opinion about that, right? Or, members of Congress or what have you. So another suggestion is, when you leave, try to be professional, right? Like don't be snarky, right? Like this is not, if you're going to send a goodbye email, have it be like, wish you the best, right? I mean, this is not, because business,
and there's self-protective reasons to do this.
Yes,
because whatever career you've chosen, whatever job discipline, that world is a small world.
Yep. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I've worked in advertising for years, and I'm connected to people in advertising, certainly on the West Coast, by 1 or 2 degrees every single time, right? And so you want to leave gracefully, and I think it's the same thing with relationships. Right. I mean, any single grown up over the age of 30 has sat in a bad first date listening to someone talk about their horrible ex. Right. Which is just a disqualifying, like there's not going to be a second date. Like you don't need to talk trash about former employers, former, spouses, former relationships. Like try to not do that.
Also, be mindful of the fact that if you do that, you might be, I remember hearing a horrible story of a relationship that had ended poorly, a romantic relationship. And it happened 6,000 miles from where I'm sitting now. Right. And then I heard the story again from somebody else. It was such a horrible story that you would imagine. I go, that sounds just like, and the person telling me the story goes, oh, Jason too? And I was like, this guy's story had become legend. It was people who are not connected to each other had either heard the story or were retelling the story all around this guy I knew from Cupertino, who then lives now 6,000 miles away. It was that bad of a story. Do not be that guy. Do
Well,
not.
and same with social media too. I mean,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
resist the urge to
Yeah.
post whatever it is that you're posting. And then I think
Correct.
the last piece is, really take time to process. Like one of the things that I've noticed when I was early in my career and left one job for another better opportunity, I wasn't expecting the grief. I wasn't expecting that the transition would be that hard because I'm choosing this, right? And recognize that leaving one position, one place, one way of life, and moving to another, even if it's something you choose, can still bring up grief. It can bring up worry. It can bring up concern. Sometimes the grief is like, I can't believe I stayed this long in this bad job.
Yeah.
Right. And to give yourself some space and some time, because like you said, physically moving is one of the more stressful things you can do. And if you combine that physical move with with like a job change, that's a tremendous stress on your psyche, and you need to plan accordingly, right? Build in support and rest. And the last thing I'll say is, if you have a sort of self-reflective spiritual practice, anything like that, take a beat. What did you learn from this job? What do you want to do differently in your next one? And then really throughout this leaving process, try to be mindful of your values and intention, right? So one of the things I used to think about when I had kids at home is whatever I'm doing, my kids are watching, and my kids will do what I do. They won't do what I say, they'll do what I do. And if I leave gracefully, respectfully, honoring, the time I need to transition, my kids will see that, right? Yep. They'll observe that and learn from it. And how am I acting in the world? Am I acting according to my values?
Right. I'm smiling because there was a guy known to me named Frank, and Frank used to work at American Express. And Frank decided that he wanted to quit his soulless job at American Express, but he wanted to do so in noteworthy style. So for his last day on the job, he showed up wearing a pink tutu with no explanation given, just the pink tutu. And they came out and they said, "We don't know what you're doing, but I guess it's your last day. So you need to leave like now." And he was like, "Well, I plan to work the whole day." And it became like a really weird thing. I mean, fortunately, he was kind of an agent provocateur. This was his deal. This is what he liked to do. It wasn't like he was trying to get other corporate jobs where it would circulate that he was a guy who showed up in the pink tattoo tutu with bloodstains on it. But that's how Frank decided to go out. And then he
excuse me, bloodstains?
Yeah, he had just had a vasectomy.
Oh!
Story gets weirder and weirder. It's a wonderful chapter of the Pranks book by the guys at the research publishing company, and the guy's name is Nom de Plume is a Frank discussion. That's
wow.
how we read it. That's how.
Right. On that note, do you have a fire me?
Yeah, I do. I have somebody who left a big corporation. Hated it the last year there, and the big corporation was Google, even though it was getting paid a king's ransom, and but just structurally it was not. It wasn't working. So they gave voluntary buyouts, and he put his name in the hopper for it, and they chose him. And it was such a lucrative package that at the age of 55, he's like, "Yeah, I think I'm done." And so he put a very nice posting up on LinkedIn. And I've seen the story from the inside and I've seen the story from the outside. So I know that if it was going to be 100% honest, it wouldn't have been as it was. But with a little distance and a little time, his last day was 5 days ago. With a little distance, a little time, he was able to approach it with a certain amount of equanimity. And he, wrote a very nice posting. And I could see people that he had talked about, that he had worked with, were it felt appreciative. Like nobody wanted to feel bad on top of already feeling bad that he was going. So it was it was gracious and graceful. And in terms of capping the show, I think that's probably how you want to be remembered. So
absolutely. All right. So if you have any ideas, suggestions, questions, WTF at badbossbrief.com. I read every single one and will respond to most. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks for joining.
All right. Adios.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleek 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, work case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.